Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today is Mr. Hovig Etyemezian. Mr. Etyemezian is the head of the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Mosul, Iraq. Together we will talk about the current situation in the country. Welcome. So Iraq has gone through many wars, many civil wars, conflicts and invasions too. The recent one was the presence of ISIS, the Islamic State in the territory. What is the situation in the country now, and also what are the security conditions there?
Yeah, I just finished actually my assignment to Iraq after 2 years and a half, so I'll be moving to my next post in a few months. Fortunately, the war against ISIS has ended, so the security situation is a little bit better than it was a year and a half ago. But still, the country has many challenges, including many security issues that they are facing. So it's not out of the woods yet.
And when you say many security issues, what do you mean? Is it about mines? Is it about, again, some small groups of terrorists? Or what is it exactly?
It's a mix of, I would say, political instability, a number of different military factions that are armed, that are still present in the country. Criminality, terrorism is there, also unexploded ordnance and mines and whatnot is there also. So it's a mix of many security issues. So the UNHCR handle the displaced camps, and also there are different kind of camps in the country. And what are exactly the living conditions there? In Mosul, how many displaced people are there, and where are they from? Who are they exactly? We had, at the peak of the crisis, we had over 1 million displaced people, Iraqis who left Mosul city, but also the outskirts of Mosul and Nineveh governorate, where Mosul city is. Today we have, I think, over 300,000 internally displaced Iraqis who are mostly living in 13 camps in Nineveh, so around Mosul. And these are coming from all over Nineveh governorate, from Mosul, which is in the eastern part of Nineveh governorate, all the way to the Syrian border. These are residents, Iraqi residents of Nineveh who have fled the conflict and who are unable to return to their zones of origin, be it because their homes are destroyed, be it because of ethnic sectarian tensions, be it because of armed militias who are not allowing them to return to their areas of origin. And these people, of course, camps are always for us the last resort, because regardless of the standards in the camp, because we have standards, international standards that we abide by in the provision of assistance in camps, camps remain very difficult environments. They are not organic environments. They are very synthetic. They're not conducive to a dignified life. We try to the best of our capacity to provide a dignified, basic, sustainable life, but it's very difficult. So ideally people would return as soon as possible.
You have been working with those displaced people, and you have been, I guess, talking with them a lot. What are the most striking stories that really had an impact on you? Do you have some?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I was talking about it earlier today actually is that it's funny because I don't get an Armenian taste to what I do all the time. But I got that Armenian taste in Mosul because, and I didn't know this, to my ignorance, Mosul seems to have been a place where a lot of Armenian girls were brought after the genocide. So in Mosul and in the camps, I've met so many displaced who, when I say I'm Armenian, they say, oh, my grandmother was Armenian. And if you dig a little bit deeper into this, you find that it's either these Armenian orphans that were either sold in the markets and bought by, Iraqi families, or they were protected by these families. They were brought and then they were adopted by these families. So that was one kind of surprise to me, that a lot of these families, I suddenly had a kind of a connection because they said, oh, my grandmother is an Armenian. So that's one thing that kind of stood out. The other thing is when we were kind of going to the territories that ISIS had left and the Iraqi government took over, there's these Christian areas where there were churches. And then when I walked into those churches, they were the same images of the churches that we used to see in our books when we read about the genocide, because it's the same burned from the inside with writings on the walls, without going into the details of what is written. So that was the second kind of surprising element to this. The third one I would say is that the general optimism and hope. I feel that I found everywhere I've been, whether in Africa or in the Middle East, that people have generally continue having hope. And those who have the least hope the most, they're the most optimistic. So they're hopeful about returning. They're hopeful that their children will get a better life.
Okay, let's go back to the shelters, the camps. So the refugee camps, the displaced camps are supposed to be temporary shelters, but they seem to have become long-term ones. What's the reason exactly?
Yeah, it's interesting because we constantly say, as I said earlier, camps are the last solution. When we build camps, we always say, this is only for a few months. We say it, the host government where we're building the camps says it, the people in the camps say it. So everyone agrees that the camps have to be temporary. And the way we build them even, it's done so that we can close it. It's not done for permanence. The problem is not with the camps. The problem is with the conflict. So whenever you have a conflict that ends, people are able to return, you close the camps. When the conflict stays for a longer period of time, then naturally the camp will stay. So when we look at camps and the longevity of camps, we shouldn't look at the camp actually, we should look at the conflict. So for example, for the Syrian refugees in Jordan, if the conflict is over in Syria, I believe most of the refugees from Zaatari will return. For the Iraqis, they're in their own country. If their areas of origin, the conflict ends, they will all return and we will close the camps. So the longevity of the camps is really linked to the source of the problem and source of the displacement, which is the conflict. And that's where we have to ask the people who are part of the conflict why it's not ending. And the moment it ends, by experience, the moment the conflict ends, the camps disappear very fast.
Do you feel like the international community has dropped countries like Iraq? Back in time, the media, the Western media, used to talk more about the conflict and what was going on in this region. Not anymore. They're more focused on the refugees coming to Europe or the Western countries. Do you think the focus is the wrong focus?
Unfortunately, it's without going into East and West. Unfortunately, it feels to me, and I'm gonna make a generalization here, it feels to me it's almost a human tendency that our attention span is very short. And so there are many other conflicts in the world today, like the Mauritanian refugees, the Tuareg Arab refugees from Mali who are now in Mauritania on the border between Mali and Mauritania. You hear nothing in the news about them. I was there in 2012, 2013. They're still there. No one is talking about them. And so it feels to me that when a conflict emerges, at the onset of the conflict, there's a high interest from the global media, from the global community, international community, and then the longer the conflict lasts, the less attention the conflict gets. Also, from conflict to conflict, the attention varies. So some conflicts, I don't want to go into the reasons why, but some conflicts get more attention than others. And so there are many forgotten conflicts in the world today that we don't speak about, but people are suffering as much and sometimes even more than the people we hear about. Because the more we hear about a case, it means there's more funding going to that problematic, or alleviating some of the suffering that people go through. So it feels to me, unfortunately, is that as humans, our attention span is very short.
You have been working for 15 years in this field, so you experience many things with refugees, with displaced people. What would be your main sentiment or feeling about your experience? Or the thing about refugees that you would like to say, for example?
Well, first of all, I'm grateful that I do what I do. I love my job. I enjoy it. I'm also grateful that I get to meet, I have many friends, many of whom are refugees still, or were refugees and now they're back home, or were refugees and now they're resettled. I'm grateful for having the opportunity to do what I do. And I've also, I think my work with refugees puts a lot of things in perspective. I am, I think, humbled by the experience of people who, in the middle of immense suffering, are able to be positive. So I tell myself, who am I not to be positive if they are so positive? I want to give you one example that I think last time you guys covered it in California. There's this Somali refugee who I'm still in touch with, who was in Shusha camp in Tunisia, who had told me there that he wants to be a movie producer and movie director in Hollywood. And he managed to do that in a span of, 10 years or something. I mean, if he can do that, I mean, who are we to complain about anything, So I'm just grateful for doing what I do and meeting people like him.
So you have also been working, as you said, in Tunisia. You have been working also in Jordan, I think. So in the Middle East and African countries, for your job. Do you see any positive changes or even an end to the ongoing conflicts?
I mean, the positive comes from the people. I think regardless of those who are involved in the conflict, the positive that I see almost every day is the resilience and the determination of those people who are enduring the conflict to not accept the end result and to continue seeking a better life and seeking a better life for their future generations, their children. That is the positive. I think the negative is that we continue seeing war and suffering. And to this date, having grown up also in Lebanon during the war, the way it started and the way it ended, I don't honestly see a sense in why war starts, because people who started and ended almost all the time are the same people. That's the negative. I don't see how is it that this continues, right? And as long as there's that determination to continue festering conflict, we will see suffering. So that's the negative part. But I cling on to the positive, which is the resilience of the people.
And next, and last question, it's a more personal one. What is the reason, you already gave us a hint, but what is the reason behind your choice to dedicate your life to a humanitarian work?
Well, it wasn't necessarily a plan. In Lebanon, when I was doing my undergrad, I got attracted to the human rights kind of movement in Lebanon. So I was volunteering in a human rights organization. Then I wanted to do a master's in that field, and I did it. And then there I started thinking about working in humanitarian work. And I think one thing led to the other. So there was no plan, but I'm glad that it happened. I can't see doing anything else. I find it a fantastic job. So I enjoy it. As I said, I enjoy dealing and serving the people who I think humble me. so yeah, I mean, it's just been a nice surprise in life that I can do this. So I feel lucky.
But in certain way, you increase the risks to put your own life in danger in a conflict situation, right? So was it about something else also? I mean, I guess you thought about that before engaging yourself in this.
It's interesting, the perceptions, because, you know, the biggest threat that we have in our line of work is car accidents. Oh, okay. So there might be a perception, yes, and of course in areas of conflict there is a risk of you being hurt by the conflict itself. But on a day-to-day basis there are so many other things to worry about. I don't think I did the calculation that much when I started this. I think I was attracted to the job, to the discovery of these places. And as I said, I think the experience humbles you. So that's, I think that has a soothing effect. But also I think I don't know, maybe I don't pay enough attention to that.
Okay. And another question that now I remember. During your conference, your speech at Innovate Armenia, the event that was held in Los Angeles, you said that the way the refugees make their march in the deserts or on the roads reminded you the past times when Armenians used to also be in exile and walk. It's striking. How would you define this? Does that happen often, to see that kind of... do you do this comparison? Do you see really, does that affect you when you see that and you remember the past histories, stories of Armenians or of your relatives talking about what happened back in time?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it to varying degrees. It depends on the context. As I was telling you, in Iraq, with the things, the way things happened in Mosul, the way, for example, ISIS sold young Yazidi and Christian girls in the markets, knowing that 100 years ago in Mosul, the same markets were selling Armenian young orphans. That definitely kind of was such a big image in front of me. It was interesting because we also, at some point in Iraq, we received Turkmen displaced. So that was also an interesting kind of experience for me as an Armenian, to receive Turkmen displaced, kind of weird links to the past. I think it varies from one experience to the other. I can say that in Iraq I had such a striking recollection of what happened. But I think we are also, as Armenians, it's almost in our DNA now, unfortunately. We're taught these things as little kids, and so it comes to mind in also a very sporadic way. I can't always link it to an exact event. So it comes and goes, but it's there in the background.
Okay, thank you very much for this talk. Thank you for joining, and continue to follow CivilNet.